As you know, I'm always looking for new ghost stories, and you can tell your ghost story to me in person if you book at the Phantom History House Bed and Breakfast. Go to phantomhistoryhouse.com, check out our 4 themed rooms, and book, and we will talk very soon. Hello again, everyone. Steve here with Phantom History in the Phantom History House Library, and I'm really excited to welcome Diane Newcomb to the podcast, all the way from Eureka Springs, Arkansas. How are you doing, Diane?
Hi, good. Thanks for contacting me.
Oh, of course. And thank you for talking about what you do for a living there at the Basin Park Hotel, and also sharing some of the paranormal activities and history that happened there. But before we get to all that dark stuff and juicy stuff, tell me a little bit about you. Are you a paranormal investigator? Are you a historian? What is your link to the Basin Park Hotel?
Well, I've lived here for a long time, and I used to go there, frequent they had a bar up on the top floor where they had pool tables and table shuffleboard. And I remember hearing the stories about the hauntings there almost every time I was there. Somebody was talking about how it was haunted. And I never really was pursuing the paranormal. I just took a part-time job actually working as a tour guide at the Crescent, which is the other haunted hotel in town. And I worked there for a few years actually before I started doing the Basin Park. I was a part of the team and the management and the same management and all that for a long time. They changed the tour a few years ago. It was an 8 o'clock 2 hour historical tour with some ghost hunting. So we've turned it upside down. We've made it more of a late night, starting at 10:30, ending at midnight, paranormal investigation tour. So we've got equipment for everyone to use. We talk to the ghost a little bit more. I take them all over the hotel, and we have special access to places most people don't get to go. And there's surprises involved, and it's just a whole lot more interactive and fun for the guests.
And that was going to be my next question is, do strange things happen on these tours? It sounds like they certainly do. Um,
They do, and they can. It's rare, but I definitely include those in my stories while we're going through the hotel. I'm telling everybody where we are, what happened there, and showing the photos and such.
and I love the fact that you start so late at 10:30. I remember seeing that on the website when I was tracking you down and doing my research. I was like, wow, that's a late tour.
Right.
Most of those tours do start at 8. Why is that? Is it more active that late? Is it easier to avoid the guests who may not want to participate? What is it with that time?
Well, it adds to the mystique, and there's nobody around. We start on the sixth floor, and it's rather dark when people arrive. They have a little surprise, offering them directions, and she's kind of freaking a lot of people out. um, anyway, yeah, it's just a better time for it. We found that we had a lot more history before, which is always interesting, but people wanted more thrills and chills. So that's what we're going for, is that late night thrills and chills thing.
Absolutely. The atmosphere really adds to the experience, I'm sure, in a place like that. So
It
oh,
does.
before we talk about those specific thrills and chills, let's talk a little bit about the history of the Basin Park Hotel. From what I've read, construction and the opening was in July of 1905. Is that right?
Right. Hmm.
Okay. But it replaced another building. Did I read that correctly?
That's right. And a lot of our hauntings actually come from that previous structure, and it was called the Perry House. It was there from 1880 to 1890, and it burned. So the 1800s were a very interesting time period for this little town because a number of the outlaws and cowboys were known to frequent this little town. And it wasn't so little as it is now back then. It very quickly grew to be the fourth largest town in the state. And this little town of Eureka now has about 2,000 citizens, whereas back then, in the early 1800s, it grew in just a very few short years to have over 20,000 people. There were 18 saloons, and they came there for the bathhouses, the shopping, and a lot of no doubt brothels and bathhouses and such, and lots of poker. Poker is the theme there with our haunting too.
Well, it's the Wild West at that point. Still, it's
Exactly.
Yeah, and you're northern Arkansas. Am I correct in my geography?
Northwest, yes.
Northwest. Okay.
Mhm.
The Perry House, I think I read that it was supposed to be like incredibly safe and not supposed to burn. Is that correct? Like they had escape routes for every floor. Did I read that right?
Well, the the crest or the basin is known for its Robert Ripley's mention with 7 levels and all having a ground level fire escape.
Okay.
And that's true because they built the building up against a bluff there. And the bluff is taller than the hotel, basically, so that all the ramps just go across to the bluff.
Okay.
Uh,
So no matter what floor you're on, you can get out of the building and hopefully away from any harm. That's the thought.
right.
Okay. Uh, talk to me a little bit about what is Basin Park? That there's a waterway or a spring or something. That's part of the attraction to that area, correct?
Right. The Perry House was built right there, just about 200 feet from a spring that was native. Osage natives here were, it was a legendary spring they had mentioned about it being the purest healing waters. So, a doctor named Jackson came here in the 1850s and he discovered that spring, basically putting it on the map. But it was a judge discovering a healing there in the late 1870s that really started things going crazy. We know that within about a year and a half of him telling people about his healing, that they had around 15,000 people or so who came, and they said they were coming like 200 a day. So it had a crazy immediate growth from that spring, which, like I said, it's right there by the hotel. And yeah, so then the basin is right there as well.
So
And
was the belief that if you bathed in the water, it had healing powers, or did you drink it, or do we know how did that work?
well, both apparently, but drinking it was medicinal apparently. And
Okay.
there's about 70 springs in Eureka Springs. That's the main one though.
Okay. And when you talk about healing, are we talking like for any ailment, tuberculosis? Because I know that was a big issue around that time in our history.
Yes, no doubt back then a lot of people came for that. And there were a few different springs around town that they claimed would heal certain ailments. Um, but the Basin Spring was just known in general to be the most healing waters.
Okay. So that's quite an attraction. Besides the beauty of the area, like I said when we first started chatting, I'm familiar with the area. Being a Missouri boy, we would go down there for vacations every once in a while. It's absolutely a beautiful part of the country, but having that healing power, I'm sure, was a big draw as well, like you said. Just
Yeah.
so we can get a feel of the size of this hotel, how many stories are we talking, and how big is this hotel?
Well, it's 7 stories altogether. And it has about 70 rooms, I believe. I'm supposed to know how many. Um, it has 2 wings. It's in a big U shape with a courtyard in the middle. There's a north wing and a south wing. The top floor, though, is not rooms. It's a ballroom and a large foyer and a service room. And that's where we begin our tour every night.
Uh,
We make our way down.
oh, so you start at the top and work your way down floor by floor.
Right. Hmm.
And of course, I don't want to give away all the secrets. I want people to come and experience and get some of these ghost experiences for themselves. But is there a most haunted location within the building, in your experience?
There is. There's areas that are known for more activity, and one of those is on the first floor, which is actually one level up from the lobby. And that's where the bar and restaurant is. And because I think there's a lot of people and energy and activity there, that there's a lot more hauntings because they're able to utilize that energy. And same with the third floor on the south wing. That's one of my favorite areas. We've had a number of photographs and stories out of that part of the hotel, and it's in particular it's cowboys. So I think it's fun that we have all these cowboys that haunt there. There's been a number of reports and a few photos, but in addition to the cowboys, we've got a child, we've got a woman, we've got another woman. I mean, there's been quite a few captures and stories from, you know varied individuals, and everyone has their own story to tell, their own encounter. It's always a little bit different, but then there's a few ghosts, who seem to reappear from time to time.
So these cowboys that you talk about, what is a encounter with one of them like? Is it a residual like shadow that people see, or is it more intelligent, or does it vary?
Well, no, they just show up every now and then, and from what I hear, people say they see them walking through the walls. And when they walk through the walls, and I mentioned this on my tour, I believe these are Perry House ghosts because they're walking through the Perry House, not this hotel. It was there before this hotel. And we even have one famous cowboy that actually died in the Perry House that we believe haunts the Basin Park on that third floor.
Do we know who he is and how he passed?
Yes, he was quite famous.
But you have to take the tour to find out who that is.
That's right.
I like
I
that.
can't give it all away here.
I completely understand. I am totally there with you. That is amazing. You said that there was
Sadly,
a
sadly, a lot of people on the tour don't even know who he was, but he was quite famous, and most of the older folks have heard of him because there was a movie years ago.
okay. I have some guesses, and I'll have to ask you after we wrap up if I'm right. Because I love history, and again, being from that part of the country, I'm familiar with some of the cowboy stories from there. You mentioned that there's a child spirit. Did I hear you right earlier?
Yes, there's several actually. They've been captured on film a number of times, little girls mostly. There's one on that third floor. There's another one or two that are seen on the first floor in the bar and restroom and one of the dining rooms. And then there's another one up on the top floor that we actually interact with on the tour fairly or often, I'd say.
What would you say that the age is when you say little girl? Are you talking like elementary school age?
The one on the top floor we believe is about 3. She's very small.
Oh, wow.
And there's one on the first floor that might be between 8 and 10, possibly. She's young, but not little. And the one on the third floor, we got a recent photo of the back of her head. She looks about 10 in that age range.
Wow. What do you think the tie is to these little girls and the building? Any thoughts? Because I mean, you talked about cowboys and gambling, and obviously that's not the link there. Why would they be there, do you think?
It's always difficult to say, and it would be nice if we knew who all had been there and who they might be that haunts there. We don't know specifically the living people who haunt that place and if they died there. I always emphasize to my guests that, not all deaths equal a haunting and not all hauntings came from a death. These could be just energy patterns. They could be sentient, um, entities. They could be lost souls. There's a lot of paranormal that's unexplainable. But, just from our sightings and the dress sometimes and different little clues, we kind of get an idea of the time frame that these people or these spirits might be from. Some are just a loop of energy that just seems to repeat, and some of those might happen at the same time at the same place. I haven't figured any of those out yet, but they're obviously not happening on my tour. There is one on the 5th floor. It looks like a cowboy. We caught him in a shadow, and I heard about a sighting of him, and it seemed to have been like right after midnight. So we're getting close on that one. So it's an ongoing investigation, which is really cool because we're constantly every night trying to find incidences that might repeat and stories and photographs. And that's what makes it interesting when you've had several psychic sightings or the psychics come and they mention things. They tell us they see them. And I hear a lot of different ones telling me different things, but when you hear the same thing happen or described 3 or 4 times, then it seems to make sense, right? And then someone gets a photograph. So you've got all this evidence. And that's what we're putting together on this ongoing investigation.
And I
We
love that it's
still,
I love that it's framed that way because I know like on the website it talks about there's mysteries here and we need to get them answered. It's there's not a whole lot of places. It's happening more and more, but there's not a whole lot of historic places that embrace their hauntings
Right.
as much as this seems
Well,
to.
a lot of the guests who rent at the hotel are unaware of the hauntings. They don't come there for that. It's kind of interesting. And then we have the tour, and we bill it as a as an introductory investigation. Most of our guests are not but investigators. We get a few that have done some in the past, but I tell them this is a nice introduction. You get a 101. Here's how we do it. And we hand out a lot of equipment. We go around beeping and lighting up, and you know, it it's interesting to me getting to see it every night because it's different every night. And I tell them that, and I don't know that they all believe me because when it's all lit up everywhere, I'm like, this is really cool. This doesn't always happen. They don't realize on some nights I can't make it happen. It's not there.
Right?
So
I've had
it's
investigators say, the ghosts are not your parlor trick. They're going to do what they want when they want, not on demand.
exactly, yeah.
Ah,
And they do see that those meters don't go off all the time everywhere, but when they do, and then it's something you notice. You take note.
right, absolutely. Now, have you ever had an experience there that you'd be comfortable sharing? Have you seen or heard or witnessed anything that's definitely paranormal or made you think, oh, this place is really active?
Yeah, I'm aware that they're aware of me, and I'm trying always to be respectful. I do speak to them even when I'm alone up there sometimes. And I've only had a few minor incidences. And when these things happen, you always kind of second guess yourself. You wonder if that really did happen, if I'm reading it right, or let me try it again. And then you can't recreate it. So like one night I opened up this one closet that I go into every night, and I felt like the door had hit someone. And we all know what that feels like when you bump a door open and someone's standing there, you bonk them. That's exactly what it felt like to me. But then I kept pushing the door and I swung it back and forth, and there was nothing that I could explain what it hit. So to me, if it's unexplainable, it's most likely paranormal. Well, a couple of nights after that, I had to go in that same door. I didn't hit anything, but I had to go in and close it more or less to go behind it. And while I was in there, a little door behind me that I open every night, and it never closes, it closed while I was in there. And there's usually a draft coming up out. It's actually a dumbwaiter shaft, which is really cool, and people get to look down in there. So air comes up through it from the kitchen, and there's always this air, so it doesn't just close. But it did that one time when I was in there with the door closed.
Well,
And
what
then,
was your reaction? Did it startle you? Were you worried, or were you just like, oh, this is so cool? What did you think?
no, I was just like, oh, okay. And then let's see, not long ago, I was waiting on the elevator, and I was up there alone, and the doors to the ballroom rattled. And they don't just do that. I've never heard them do that, but that once, maybe one more time. But it just made me think that, they were letting me know they're there.
They're letting you know that they knew that you were there.
Yeah, I
You're
guess.
welcome. And it's other than the paranormal aspect, this hotel has such really interesting history, not only from the so-called healing waters of the basin, but I love the story about the barefoot ball. Am I remembering
Right.
that correctly?
Right. Yes.
I was wondering if you could share that with us. What was that? I know it was linked to a radio show, I believe.
Well, it was a show out of Chicago called Truth or Consequences. And I'm old enough to vaguely remember that. But yeah, this couple apparently, and this was back in the early 50s, they had won a trip from that show to Eureka Springs. And apparently they win, but there must have been a consequence because they were told that they needed to go barefoot in Eureka Springs. So they were there for a week apparently and went barefoot everywhere. They were really good sports. So the townspeople thought they were such good sports, they threw them this barefoot ball, and everyone danced with no shoes. And it was a big tradition there for ever since the 50s until COVID.
Oh, really?
And yeah, Yeah, it happened again. They did do it last November with the Folk Fest, but they didn't do it at that ball. They actually did it with the auditorium downtown.
Hmm.
So it's still a tradition in town, but it wasn't in the ballroom.
Wow, well, that's amazing that it lasted that long, and what a really cool way to, recognize those people for being such good sports. And just a fun historic fact, not all history has to be scary. So I'm just
Right. Yeah.
and I know that places that like the Basin Park, hotels, there's a lot of energy that goes in and out, like you talked about, which could feed into a lot of the activity. And to another point that you said earlier, there's a lot of things that go on in hotels that we just don't know or aren't recorded in history. What other than the incident in the closet, have there been any experiences on tours that have caught you off guard or surprised you, or that a guest experience that kind of stands out in your memory?
Yes, and I include some of this in my tour, but I had a lady one night see the back of a woman's head drift into one of the walls. Um, I've had a few psychic people encounter certain spirits. One of them had there's a man in a tuxedo in this one doorway, and she said he walked right through her. And I had a man one night, he saw blue eyes of a woman right in his face. He was super excited about it. And there's a blue-eyed woman that's been seen there for many years. But that's mostly what people see is just the eyes of a woman in their face.
Wow, that's
So, we don't know who she is or don't know anything about a lot of these ghosts. We just know that there's been sightings.
right. And I found it interesting that you said a little bit earlier that a lot of the guests there just don't know that these hauntings are there. So do guests ever call the front desk saying, "Hey, my TV's acting weird," or "the lights are flickering"? I mean, it doesn't sound like it's those kinds of hauntings.
Well, yes, the hotel hears from guests when weird things happen.
Okay. So they do happen in the rooms because I know again
Yeah.
a lot of hotels say that's a kind of an ongoing thing. I think it was the third floor you said was pretty active. So when I come visit, I may try to stay on that floor. See what I can uncover. So you talked about the history and of course the paranormal aspect to this. I wanted to ask you a couple more follow-up questions before we say goodbye. I know that this building has been around a long time. It's gone a bunch of different ownerships. Was there a point in the history of the Basin Park where it was like on the edge of demolition or anything like that and was saved? I know that happens a lot with these historic structures.
No, this one was always sound in its structure, I would say. But the 1950s were a very interesting time period. We talked about the Barefoot Ball, but there was also a couple there who had a lot of activity. And then we know that between the 20s and the 50s, there were a lot of gangster activity from Chicago. There was a lot of promotion from Chicago. But from the 50s to the 80s, Eureka Springs just wasn't all that prosperous. So there were times when the hotel was not being utilized. And there was one owner there in particular who turned it into a museum because he couldn't fill the rooms. And it was all very strange. He actually put an Elvis uh, Lincoln up on the top floor in the foyer. We've got pictures of the crane lifting it up to the top floor and getting it in one of the windows. And he put that picture on billboards to attract people into Eureka. But yeah, I heard that during some of that time frame, they had broken windows and abandoned floors, nothing being done. And
Mhm.
as far as I know, the building was never at risk of being demolished or anything like that. It's been totally restored. It's all in great shape now.
And I love that. Again, these historic buildings need our attention and our love. And I'm glad that this one, wasn't on the edge of not existing anymore. Because again, that happens so often. It sounds like that the folks that own it and run it, embrace its history, embrace its paranormal side. And to follow up on something you said earlier, this is one of two very haunted hotels in Eureka
Yeah.
Springs.
One
And
of their
one of the things
missions is to protect the irreplaceable, and I like that.
I love that. Protect the irreplaceable. And you're absolutely right. When one of these buildings is gone, it's gone forever. And, so are all those memories. We're not going to go in depth in the other location, but what is the other haunted hotel called? And do you also do tours there?
Yes, the 1886 Crescent Hotel, which is also known as America's most haunted hotel. The tours there are a little different in that I wear a Victorian costume, and we do talk about the history of the town. And the hotel was built by the Eureka Improvement Company, who also built the town led by the governor of Arkansas at that time. 1884 to 86, they built it, and it was the grandest, fanciest motel or hotel west of the Mississippi. They wanted to attract their wealthy carriage set, and they did. And it was a spectacular place that's also had a very rich history with being a girls' college for a time and then a cancer treatment hospital.
Wow, that's an interesting mix. And
Yeah,
yeah, and I know that we're not going to go into depth in this one yet. I do want to talk about it at another time, but I'm sure that stirs up a lot of interesting paranormal activity with that kind of background.
absolutely. And the tour every night is sold out. We do multiple tours, and visiting the former morgue is the highlight of that tour, of course.
I was going to say, if it was a hospital, I'm sure there's a morgue section. Switching back to the Basin Park, because again, I don't want to go too far into the Crescent yet. Is there any location or room or section of the hotel that we didn't touch upon that you think is important for listeners to learn about, whether it's the courtyard or a specific room? Anything like that stand out?
Well, yeah, I mentioned the Crescent and the morgue, but the Basin also has its interesting lower regions. We have a speakeasy with a secret entrance, and I'm not going to go any further into that because it's one of the surprises on my tour. And I told you it's built up against a bluff in the back,
Right.
and when we get to that lower level, they get a very special room that's surprising to everyone when they get down there. It's pretty cool. And we also have a spirit down there that we've caught on video. We have still photographs. We have had a number of people encounter this spirit, and we don't know who it is, but I have to warn everyone about it.
Wow. So are these spirits, I hate using the word friendly. Are they malevolent? Are they not malevolent? Are they just happy to have the attention again? What is your take on all of this?
Well, I have to say some of them are just there, and that's all we can say about them. They're not necessarily evil. I don't like to use the word demon, and in fact, I don't think I'm working with any at either hotel. But actually, there's one questionable, but the as far as they go, and this one in the basement there, I tell everybody that I think there's a life lesson there, because if you have an angry spirit, that person must have been angry for some reason, and they're still angry and they're stuck in that anger. And I tell everybody, you don't want to be that ghost, do you?
Right.
So, that's the way it's been described to me also, is that a spirit can be um, in death just like they were in life. They might have been a nice person, they might not have been a nice person.
Right. You carry your personality on with you. So
Yeah,
yeah,
but
that's a good way to
they
look at it.
could also be stuck in a little loop of energy that might have been associated with an emotion. So that's what we encounter. And I've had a number of people on tours in both hotels burst into tears when they encounter certain spirits that are sad. And I have those at both hotels.
So they're a little
Empathic
bit,
people pick up on that.
so a little bit more empathic maybe than they thought they were and can actually pick up on that. Um,
Yeah, well, it surprises some people. They don't expect to encounter that, and then they end up with an overwhelming emotion.
wow. I'm curious about your own personal experiences, Diane. You talked about how you were interested in history, and you had visited the hotel earlier in your life before you worked there. When was your first encounter with something paranormal? Do you recall when that was or what it was?
Yes, several years ago, well, over 30 years ago, I had a dream once, and as far as I I was asleep. I never awakened, but when I woke up, I was like, wow, I had the weirdest dream. It was like this man came and looked over the bed at me and he asked me, where's Steve? That was my husband. And I said, well, he's right there. And I told Steve about this, and he's like, oh, that's interesting. That sounds, and I described the guy. He was, had a particular look to him. And he said he thought he knew who that was. And then I described him to some other local people, and they also felt like they knew exactly who that was. So I think this guy just came to say hi to Steve.
Wow. Was it a relative who had passed or a friend?
No, we were actually living on a Caribbean island. And so it was an islander, and they're African descent, but this man in particular had a very long face with a very light complexion and a lot of freckles, which is kind of rare. He
Right.
was easy to describe. And yeah, people, I mentioned that too. They're pretty superstitious down there. They believe that stuff. So yeah, they were like, oh yeah, that's so and so. I don't remember his name now, but I've since had another couple of dreams like that also. And that somnolent state, when we're half asleep, half awake, or just on the edge of sleep, that's when
Mhm.
our mind is, of course, a lot more susceptible to anything paranormal.
Yeah, I think so too. That's when we're the most open and when that veil is the thinnest. You see and experience things that you can't otherwise.
And
Well,
I've kind of worked on developing that a little bit because I would like to have a little more insight. I'd like to be more connected in ways that, give me a little more to what I'm trying to do. But whenever I've meditated and really started making progress with that, I've had them follow me home and wake me up in my sleep.
okay, that's something we don't want to happen. You want to leave the spirits where you find them, right?
Well, the children don't bother me so much, but I had a vision, one of those half awake sightings that kind of it made me uneasy. I still don't really know how to translate it or what it was, but um, it just it was not comfortable. So I kind of backed off from doing that.
Understandably so. And I know that a lot of people who do tours or do these investigations, usually have some kind of personal ritual to ensure that things don't follow them home. I'm guessing that might be something you do now too, to kind of ensure that doesn't happen.
Oh yes, yes. I've had to really guard my energy. I've had times when I didn't take care of all that and I just felt drained, and I know that they get in my field because I've got pictures of them.
Hmm.
So yeah, I carry crystals and I do a little protective bubble around me of intention when I get in there. And then when I leave, I do a little ghost dump every night. And I tell my guests to tell them also that they can't go with them. All you have to do is just say that, no tag-alongs.
Yeah, yeah. You did not give them permission to follow you home. And I used to do the same thing when I was a tour guide here in Tampa. I would always tell my guests, let whatever we encounter tonight know that they cannot get in the car with you and follow you home.
Yeah.
So that's very, very valid. I'm glad to hear you do that. Um, if somebody wants to take this tour or book at the hotel, how can they get a hold of you? How can they make this happen and experience this for themselves? What's the best way to reach out to you?
Tickets can be bought along with their room. If they book online, they can book their own room and add the ticket to the tour. Excuse me. They can also go directly online and just buy tickets at reserveeureka.com. And on the page where the tickets are purchased is my email address. They can question me there. And they can also go on to Facebook and Instagram if you want to see some of the photos from the hotel's tour. I'm the one who manages that, so I can be contacted through the messenger on that as well.
Okay, and that's the Basin Parks Instagram account.
And Facebook, yeah, it's actually called the Basin Park Ghost Tour. So it's been there since before this one. So we didn't rename it Paranormal Investigation, but that's what it's called when you buy the tickets.
Okay. Well, you will see me adding you and following you after we hang up because I want to see some
Okay,
of those
yeah.
stuff.
We got a really good capture just in the last few weeks. We had a gentleman show up in the hallway during the tour, and he's in the pictures. I just posted that, and there's also one of that the child that was caught on a gaming camera on the third floor in our most haunted room.
Okay. Um, This may be a tough question to answer, but if you could ballpark it, how many spirits do you think are in that hotel? Any idea?
No, no, there's probably 20 or more that I talk about and have been encountered, but I don't think it's possible to count them.
Right. And I think you're right. And I know some people believe that, spirits come and go, some are stuck, it may not always be the same one. So I always get interesting answers to that question. But with such a big property, I'm sure that the number is way up there and with that kind of history. Anything else you wanted to add before I let you go? This has been absolutely amazing. I could talk to you about this all day long, but I'm not going to keep you longer than I need to. Anything else?
Well, people ask me all the time because I'm connected with both hotels, which one's the most haunted? And I scratch my head a little bit saying I think it's a toss up. Um, there's a big difference between the two hotels, but what's really interesting is that Eureka Springs is haunted. The
The
whole
whole
town's,
thing, the whole town.
yeah. And there's theories about that. The spring water, maybe the minerals in the water, the limestone that it flows through. Maybe we're sitting on a very important energetic intersection on the planet. There's a lot of theories.
Well, that's
But
interesting.
yeah,
Some kind of portal or
there's,
vortex or something like that. That is an
yeah.
interesting way to look at it. And like you said, there was a lot of history before the hotel there with the Native Americans. What was the tribe you said was there?
The Osage and then the Cherokee were moved here for a short time too.
Okay.
But the
So
Osage originally.
that's a whole other history, story, of those people, and of course being forced to move there. And I'm sure again, we could do another deep dive there, which I'm not, I'm not going to make you do right.
Well, and one more interesting fact is that it's a very small town. Right now, the population is about 2,000. Like I said, though, at one point it was over 20. But a lot of people came here sick and diseased and dying and died there. So our little town has had a lot more deaths than most little towns probably ever had.
That's a very valid point because, yeah, if people were already ill on their way there, hoping, last ditch effort to get healed, probably didn't work for everybody. Are there a lot of cemeteries there in town?
No, no, our cemetery is actually on the eastern outskirts of town, and it's one of the more level areas of town. Our town is in the hills.
Mhm.
Um, they did have like a Potter's Field area out there for unknowns and such. Um, but yeah, there's a lot of different rumors and stories over the years. I think some are maybe beyond researching, but um,
Well, and I'm sure a lot of these people, traveled from their hometown. So if they did pass away, I'm sure they were shipped back to be buried in family plots or whatever as well. So
right.
not
Yeah,
not
the
everybody who
majority of
passed
them.
there is buried there, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Um, well, Diane, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to talk to me. This was absolutely fascinating. I can't wait to come check it out for myself. It's time that I return back to the Midwest. I haven't been there in a while in the Ozark area.
Yeah.
And again, the Basin Park Hotel, you do tours there, and the Crescent Hotel, is that right?
Basin and the Crescent, they're both owned by the same company. And if you stay in one, you get a free shuttle to the other. Even after midnight on my tour, they'll take you back.
Okay,
So,
fantastic. Well, that's a deal right there. You don't have to worry about parking in an Uber or anything. So,
right.
thank
Yeah.
you, Diane. This was really fascinating. I do want to talk to you again about the Crescent and learn more about that one as well. I just have to do my research because I have not read enough on that one yet.
Okay. Yeah.
Uh,
I'll
uh,
send you some more info if you want in an email.
oh yeah, please do. That would be fantastic. Give me a good starting point. And
Okay.
thank you for making time for me. I know you were a little bit under the weather this week, but I appreciate you making time to talk to me on this afternoon. So you enjoy the rest of your day and enjoy your weekend and get some rest.
Thank you. It was
All
nice
right.
talking to you.
Same here.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much. Hey, thanks so much for watching that. Remember, go to phantomhistory.com and sign up on the newsletter so you are alerted when we have a new podcast. And check out our new bed and breakfast at phantomhistoryhouse.com where you can book your stay and we can talk ghost stories in person in the library. See you then.